4 hours. That's all the time Becket Redfellow has left before the state of New Jersey ends his life. Most people in his position are clawing at the walls or begging for a Choplin's comfort, but Becket has something better. He has clarity. He knows exactly what a human life is worth because he spent the last few years trading them like stocks for a $19 billion payout.
The day I was born, my mother told me we were different. Yes, she had been disowned by her family, but someday I would become the sole heir. I just had to wait for all of them to die. There were 7 of them. 7 rich between myself and $28 billion.
Well, call me when you've killed them all.
But as the clock ticks down, the most successful predator in the world is sitting in a cold cell for the only murder he didn't actually commit.
This tragedy doesn't start with a needle. It starts with a choice made 18 years before Becket was even born. His mother, Mary Redfellow, was the favorite daughter of one of the wealthiest empires in the world. But when she fell pregnant as a teenager, her father, Whitelaw, gave her a brutal ultimatum: end the pregnancy or lose the billions. She chose the baby. She chose Becket. Her father watched his favorite child walk away into poverty without a single dollar of help. Becket's father didn't fare much better, suffering a fatal heart attack the very moment he saw his newborn son in the hospital. Growing up in a cramped apartment, Becket was raised as a contradiction. His mother made sure he had the culture, the class, and the style of a high-born king, despite her working at the DMV to keep the lights on. She drilled one thing into his head: being exiled didn't mean losing the claim. The Redfellow fortune was tied to an irrevocable trust designed to dodge taxes, a trust that dictated the money must always pass to the oldest living relative. In a family of 8, Becket was the youngest. All he had to do was wait for the others to die. But waiting is a slow poison. As a child, Becket met Julius Steinway at a party. He was a boy from a poor neighborhood trying to act like he belonged, telling her he was set to inherit a fortune. She laughed, sensing his desperation to impress her. It was a spark that would eventually burn down his entire world. When Mary's health began to fail, the Redfellows, who could have saved her with a single check, remained silent. On her deathbed, she made Becket swear he wouldn't quit until he had the life he deserved. When her final wish to be buried in the family mausoleum was ignored, and she was dumped in a public cemetery near the highway, Becket's soul hardened. At first, it seemed simple, but it's not. Years passed, and Becket became a ghost in his own life. He was a suit salesman, fitting wealthy men for lives he was supposed to own. He watched the 7 surviving Redfellows from a distance, seeing them waste the wealth his mother died without. Then Julia walked back into his shop. She was engaged to a man who mocked Becket's station, but before she left, she planted a seed. She asked what happened to that fortune she promised her. When he said he'd get it someday, she laughed and said the words that changed everything: "Call me when you've killed them all."
Something in Becket broke. He looked at the list of 7 names and realized he didn't need to be a killer. He just needed to be a gardener pruning a rotten tree. His first target was Taylor Redfellow, a party boy broker who thought he was untouchable. Becket followed him to his yacht, watching as Taylor threw cash from a helicopter and jumped into a pool of excess. In a moment of drunken isolation, Becket found Taylor alone on his boat. There was no complicated plan. He simply tied a heavy anchor rope to Taylor's ankle and let the weight of the ocean do the rest. A sudden splash, and the first branch was gone. The brilliance of Becket wasn't just in the killing. It was in the transformation. He attended Taylor's funeral and introduced himself to his Uncle Warren as Mary's son. Warren, overcome with a guilt that had fermented for 18 years, saw Becket as a chance at redemption. He offered Becket Taylor's old job. Suddenly, the man who was selling suits was sitting in the inner sanctum of the empire he intended to dismantle. He learned the language of money, the ways deals are made, and how the wealthy protect what's theirs. But then something unexpected happens. Julia calls him. She's married now, but she's still playing the same childhood games, taunting him to ask her out just to reject him again. Becket realizes that to win her, or anyone like her, he can't just be a broker, he has to be the owner. Next was Noah, a pretentious artist who lived in a world of ego and darkrooms. Becket posed as a fan, getting close enough to see the inner workings of Noah's life, and meeting Ruth. Ruth was everything the Redfellows weren't: warm, grounded, and deeply human. For the first time, Becket's resolve wavered. He found himself falling for the woman whose boyfriend he was about to erase.
But a promise to a dead mother carries more weight than a new love. Becket used his knowledge of chemicals to turn Noah's darkroom into a bomb. Sulfur and potassium chloride mixed with developing solution. A single spark from a light switch, and Noah was history. The police ruled it an accident, blaming Noah's poor hygiene and chemical mishandling. It was a perfect, silent strike. But this is where everything changes. The FBI began to sniff around, noticing the strange pattern of deaths in the family. Agents Pinfield and Matthews questioned Becket, but he was a master of the average man disguise. He told them that if he were set to inherit billions, he wouldn't be working a desk job. He stayed visible on cameras at food trucks, creating a trail of normalcy while he hunted the divine.
Then came Stephen Redfellow, a megachurch pastor with a history of money laundering. Becket posed as a reporter, interviewing the man who compared his own legal struggles to the suffering of Jesus. While Stephen bragged about his power and threatened Becket with a katana, Becket was busy slipping tropane alkaloids into his drink. It was a supplement overdose disguised as a natural heart attack. The church, desperate to avoid a scandal, buried the investigation along with the body. Branch by branch, the tree was thinning. And Cassandra died in her favorite spa, her high-tech home security useless against an acidic teeth-whitening treatment applied by a man in a staff uniform. Uncle MacArthur, the man obsessed with space, died of a poisoned cup of coffee as his rocket lifted off for the moon. Becket was now wealthy, successful, and moving in with Ruth. He felt content. He even decided to spare Uncle Warren, the one man who had treated him like family. But there's no turning back now. Warren suffered a natural heart attack and died in Becket's arms. His final words were a warning: don't spend your life chasing the money rabbit. Now, only one man stood between Becket and the throne, his grandfather, Whitelaw. This is where the story shifts from a hunt to a chess match. Julia reappeared, no longer the playful childhood crush, but a modern-day femme fatale. She had evidence, photos of Becket at every crime scene. She demanded a down payment of $300,000 delivered to her husband, Lyle, or she would destroy Becket's relationship with Ruth. Becket rushed to Lyle's office, cornered and furious. He signed the check, slapped the man who mocked him, and in a moment of pure, unadulterated rage, touched a letter opener on the desk. He then raced to his grandfather's mansion, expecting a final confrontation. Whitelaw Redfellow didn't hate Becket for the murders. He admired him for them. He told Becket that a conscience is just a voice in your head, and if you turn your head just right, that voice becomes a whisper. He handed Becket an heirloom trench gun and invited him to finish the job, to kill him and take the crown. But Becket refused to be a cold-blooded executioner in that moment. It didn't matter. Whitelaw locked the doors and began to hunt his own grandson through the dark halls of the estate.
In a desperate struggle for survival, Becket found a bow and arrow and killed the man who had disowned his mother nearly 20 years prior. It was a perfectly legitimate act of self-defense. Becket had won. He was the sole heir to the Redfellow fortune. He went home to Ruth, told her a sanitized version of the truth, and prepared for a life of royal luxury. But during his induction into high society, the FBI walked in. They weren't arresting him for the Redfellows. They were arresting him for the murder of Lyle Archdale. Lyle had been found stabbed to death with the very letter opener Becket had touched. Julia took the stand, weeping crocodile tears, and lied to the court, saying Becket had been obsessed with her his entire life and killed her husband out of jealousy. The man who got away with 5 calculated murders was sentenced to die for the one crime he didn't commit. In the prison cell, hours before the needle, Julia visited him one last time. She revealed she had Lyle's suicide note, the evidence that would prove Becket's innocence. But the price was everything. She wouldn't release the note unless Becket signed the entire fortune over to her.
Becket Redfellow signed the papers. He was released, a free man, but a broken one. Ruth was waiting outside, but not to take him home. She handed him his mother's locket and walked away without a word, leaving him with the realization that he had traded his soul for a prize he no longer owned. As Becket watched Ruth drive away, a black Rolls-Royce pulled up. Julia was inside, dressed in funeral black, pooning the estate, the money, and now Becket himself. He got exactly what he wanted, the Redfellow life. But he got it as a prisoner in a much more expensive cell, driven toward a gargantuan mansion with tears in his eyes. He had pruned the family tree, only to realize he had cut off the very branch he was standing on. This kind of power dynamic feels more relevant than ever, getting exactly what you want, only to realize the cost was your ability to enjoy it. Becket silenced his conscience to get the gold, but the gold became his cage.
What's interesting here is this film doesn't rely on clear heroes or villains. It leans into moral ambiguity, where the real tension isn't just who survives, but who deserves to. This moment actually reveals more than it seems. That lingering discomfort you feel after, it's by design. There's a small detail here that says a lot. This isn't a typical action-driven crime story. The film focuses on decision-making under pressure rather than action itself. What's interesting here is most of the killing isn't physical. It's psychological, financial, and strategic. 3-word recap: reset, adapt, survive. On the flick verdict scale, this movie is worth watching. Glen Powell delivers a magnetic performance, but the ending's irony is a bitter, haunting pill to swallow. So, if you were in Becket's shoes, would you have signed away the billions to save your life, or would you have died as the richest man on death row just to keep it from Julia? Drop a comment below with money or justice.